Welcome to the Realmcast, Earthrealm's ultimate Mortal Kombat podcast and the official podcast of Mortal Kombat Online.
Prepare yourselves as we dive into the depths of the Mortal Kombat multiverse, bringing you well-known and significant members of the community. I'm your host, the Mortal Kombat Phantom, and with me as always is my co-host, our Lore Master Yanni. Welcome, Yanni.
Thank you, Phantom. This is the Realmcast where every warrior has a story to tell. Today's combatant is none other than artist Michel Gagné. Welcome to the Realmcast, Michel.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Michel. Thank you so much for joining us. So for those of our fans who aren't familiar with your work, you actually worked on the original Mortal Kombat movie.
Yes.
But before we go too far into that, let's begin with your career outside of the Mortal Kombat universe. You've been involved in some projects which are considered absolute classics, like the Don Bluth films, Demolition Man. There's so many different things like Warner Brothers, Disney, Pixar, Cartoon Network, and so much more. How did your passion for animation and visual effects come about? And how did you kind of evolve from when you first became interested in your career path?
Right. Well, it really started as a kid, going to see Star Wars. I'm older than you guys. So when I saw Star Wars, I was 12 years old. It was I was born in 65. So it was in 1977. And that was pretty much it. I saw that and I'm like, yeah, I want to make special effects or something. So I didn't really know how to go about it because I grew up in Quebec City. And at the time, now the province of Quebec has tons of visual effects. I mean, they do a lot of movies there, but at the time that was not the case. And I didn't know really how to go about it, but that's what I was going to do with my life. And then I saw Star Wars and I wanted to work for George Lucas. And then I saw Close Encounter the following year and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to work for Spielberg. So I was kind of like, okay, Lucas or Spielberg, And then in 82, while I was going through finishing high school, I saw The Secret of Nim. So then it became like, oh, I want to work for Don Bluth. So it was kind of like Don Bluth, Spielberg, or Lucas, one of those three, So I finished high school, went to art college. I was a really bad student, high school, I skipped all my classes. I barely graduated. And then I went to art school and dropped out. And I was like, this is not for me. And I was like, well, how can I get into this business? So I heard of this school called Sheridan College in Toronto, and they were teaching classical animation. I'm like, that's where I should go. So I ended up going there, and I was still a bad student while I was at Sheridan College, but they had so much equipment, I was able to do a film while I was there. And even though I didn't graduate, I was able to put the little short film together. And with that short film, you guys probably don't even know VHS, but I put the film on VHS and flew to California from Toronto and went knocking at Don Bluth's studio store. And so they let me in and I walked in, I talked to the receptionist and I said, hey, I made this film here. Spent a year making this short film. I want to show it to Don Bluth. And she looked at me like I was absolutely insane. I was so clueless. You have no idea how clueless I was of everything, how the system works. But that played in my favor. Because I didn't know anything, I was like really bold, So I went oh, hey, I spent a year. Please, you have to let me see Don Bluth. And she's like, sir, please, you can't. And then she's like, where are you from? You have an accent. I said, yeah, I'm from Canada. And she said, do you have a visa to work in the US? I said, no. She said, then you can't even work here. So what are you, And I'm like, oh no, please, you have to show this to Don Bluth. And I was really obsessed. And I was like practically crying at her. And she's like, she's at this point, she's like, sir, I'm going to call security if you don't leave right now, kind of thing. So I gave her my VHS tape. I shoved it in her hands and I said, please, I'm begging you, please, you have to show this to Don Bluth. That's all my number's on there. Please, show it to him. And I left. And I was like, oh, this is a disaster. So I went back to Toronto with I was broke at this point, but I said, okay, this was a total failure. I need to get a job. So I did the same trick on another studio in Toronto that was called Lightbox Studios. And that was kind of like my second choice to break in the industry. So I knew that the guy, Greg Duffel, who directed these commercials, I really admired his work. So I said, okay, I'm going to go there and try to get a job there now. So I went to the studio and talked to the receptionist, said, hey, I made this short film. I want to show Greg Duffel. I love his work. And she said, well, just leave your resume here. Greg is a very busy man. He can't meet you, but if you leave your resume, he'll review it. And I said, no, I need to talk to him. I was kind of insane. I just wanted to talk to the directors, And And I knew what he looked like because I had seen interviews with him. And so as I'm talking to her, I see Greg walking by, like behind me with some other guy. And I turn around, I'm like, oh, Mr. Duffel, Mr. Duffel. I said, I have a film here I want to show you. And he's like, well, just leave it with my receptionist. I'm going on a shoot for a commercial. I don't have time. And I'm like, oh, sir. And then he just walks away, and I just sit at the top of the stairs because there was a stairway like right in front of the studio. So I sit at the top of the stairs and I sit there for 4 hours, and he comes back to the studio 4 hours later, and he sees me sitting at the top of the stairs, and he goes, have you been sitting there the whole time? I said, yeah, I was waiting for you to come back. And he said, okay, that deserves me giving you a chance and to show me your work. So he
Wow.
brought me in. I went in the studio. I showed him my film, and he hired me on the spot. And so that was my first job. And literally 2 or 3 days later, I get a call from California from John Pomeroy, who was the head of animation at Bluth. And he said, Michel? I said, yeah, I want to tell you something here. He said, like, when you came by our studio and you gave our receptionist a videotape of your film. And I said, I want you to really thank her because she came to us, told us that we needed to watch this film, and she wouldn't stop. She made us watch your film.
Oh,
And I said, and Don Bluth was very impressed and stuff, and would like you to start on Monday. So that was kind of like how I started in the industry. So I had to quit my job that I just got, and then flew to California, and that was
Amazing.
it. And so I worked 6 years for Don Bluth. I started as a character animator, then eventually moved to be an effects animator. And that was it. Then that was the start of my career. And then from there on, it was all like just knowing people and going from studio to studio.
That film that you used as your initial resume, have you published that anywhere? Is it
Yeah, it's on
available?
YouTube.
Which film is it?
It's called A Touch of Deceit. If you go on my
Oh,
channel, it's like a
yeah.
little rabbit with like a little pterodactyl kind of thing.
Should know.
It's not
Yeah.
great, but it was good enough to, I mean, I was a kid, so it was
Oh,
good
yeah,
enough.
it's amazing.
It was good enough to get me
It's good
getting
enough for
over there.
Don Bluth. It's good enough
Yeah,
for
exactly.
everybody. Yeah.
I mean, you saw the potential. I was hired as an assistant on American Tail.
Mhm.
And then I moved up to character animator on Land Before Time. And that was it. That was kind of like how my career kind of got going. So that was after my third year of college. But after I did 2 years, I did get picked up by a studio right away. But it was kind of doing limited TV animation. And at that point, I just had in my mind, I want to work for Don Bluth, George Lucas, or Steven Spielberg kind of thing. I still had that resonating in my mind. So I was like, okay, I quit my job. I had this job in animation, and I worked there for 3 months, and I quit, and I went back to school to make a movie so I could get a better job. And the funny thing is, my first movie as the animator was Land Before Time, which was produced by Steven Spielberg and George
Right.
Lucas and directed by Don Bluth.
Yeah.
It
I
was
love how
insane.
you had that sort of goal from the beginning, and it was your
And it was-
first.
Right. It was insane. It was like, wow, that's amazing. I hit like all three. It was kind of like, okay, now that goal is gone. Let's move on to other goals. And that from that point on, it's like, okay, let's set new goals.
Well, I have to ask
So-
that because with this in mind, you literally met all of your goals basically in your first project. So
Right.
what were the next goals you could have set for yourself? You'd
Well,
already
so-
reached sky high at that point.
Oh, yeah, really.
Right. Well, at that point, I wanted to become having more of a voice. Like when I was at Bluth, I was conforming to the style of the house style and
Mhm.
trying to do everything on model, do all the effects the way they did them. Once I left Bluth, I was like, okay, I want to make things with my own vision. So I did a short film when I was at Bluth called Prelude to Eden. I don't know if you
Mhm.
guys are familiar with it. It's like Japanese anime kind of thing. And so I was kind of like trying to figure out like, my own voice as an animator. So, and that caught a lot of attention in Hollywood. A lot of people saw this in Hollywood, and that resulted in me getting a lot of job offers and suddenly being, once I quit Bluth, I was a supervisor at that point. So I would be heading an effects department, and I had the effects department at Rich Animation and at Warner Brothers. But you mentioned I was like restless and I was like looking for new things. So my next goal was I had always like, okay, I've done animation. Let's see if I can break into live action at this point. And so I was working at Rich Animation as the effects supervisor. And this friend of mine had heard that they were looking for animators on Demolition Man. And I was like, oh man, and I had been reading Cinefex and all that. So I kind of knew a little bit how, and that was pre-computer, right? So everything was
Mhm.
done, um, very analog at this point. So, but I kind of knew the procedure and stuff. So I'm like, oh, well, let's go to the studio that's doing the effects and let's see if I can convince them to give me a shot. So we went there and I told John Van Vliet, who was the effects supervisor at Available Light. And I told him, I said, okay, just give me one shot. You don't pay me for it. Okay, just give me one shot. I will do it. And if you like it, if it works and it's in the film, then you pay me and then you can hire me to do more. I said, so, but let's do a tryout like that. So I went there and I remember like, now it's so easy with digital, but at the time, like I had to go like at night and we had this camera, this big 35 camera, uh,
Mhm.
30 millimeter camera projecting on a piece of paper, like on a big animation stand. And I had to trace like all the live action frame by frame so that I would have my reference. And so I did that and I animated everything with like a blue pencil and then I cleaned it up with like a marker, these Sharpies and stuff. And that's how we did it.
Which animation was it on Demolition Man? Was it like one of the electrical shots or something like
Yeah.
that?
So I was doing the sequence with Wesley Snipe when he breaks their
Uh-huh.
weapons at the end and he's trying to like zap
Yeah, yeah.
Sylvester Stallone and he's blowing up everything. So, so that was the sequence. And that's how it was done. And then we did it like all on with Sharpies. And these were photographed in high contrast. And then they would be run through an optical printer where we would like put the diffusions and stuff and make it
Yeah.
all work. And it was very kind of super primitive, but it worked pretty good. And actually,
Oh,
I
yeah.
had been a friend of Cinefex my whole life. And that got me a mention in Cinefex, like that movie, Demolition Man. So I was like, oh, cool. I made it in Cinefex. I
I
mean,
was
right?
always
It was just a little goal for me, like eventually to make it in Cinefex.
Oh, it's like a fantastic goal, and I was always
Yeah.
curious on how some of those old special effects were created with, because they didn't have, like you said, they didn't have the CGI and stuff. So,
No.
and everybody always talks about how it was done by hand, but
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you kind of
Yeah. It was all
diving into
drawn
that.
with markers and
Yeah.
stuff. And so anyway, and that studio. So I was still working. So I was doing my day job at Rich Animation. Then I would finish Rich at around 6. Then I would have dinner. And then at 7, I would go and do my night shift, like for Demolition Man. So I had 2 jobs at the same time. So it was pretty grueling. I couldn't do it now, but I guess in my 20s, it was okay. I could still do that, have 2 jobs at the same time.
Yeah.
And I guess they were impressed enough with this that they called me back when they got 3 movies at the same time. And they got Mortal Kombat, Destiny Turns on the Radio, and The Vampire in Brooklyn by
Mhm.
Wesley Snipes. So, and I ended up working on all 3 of these
Right.
movies and kind of going back and forth. They were all being done at the same time. So I would get an assignment on Mortal Kombat and then following week, I'd be working on Destiny's on the Radio. That was a movie with Quentin Tarantino. And
Mhm.
then there was this Vampire in Brooklyn. It's a little bit fuzzy, the details, but I can tell you what I remember about Mortal Kombat is, so the first thing I did is they had the Goro, the big puppet Goro. So
Yeah.
when they did the shoot, like the director saw the dialogue with Goro and he hated it because they
Oh,
couldn't make the mouth work with the
Mm.
right.
dialogue. So the first assignment I got, they said, okay, you need to somehow we need to fix the dialogue on this thing. So that was one of the first CG project that I did. So we used something I think it was called Elastic Reality or some type of program like that. So what I did is we printed stats of the Goro, all the
Mhm.
Goro scenes, and they were all peg registered, so I could work with them on an animation table. And then I put a piece of paper and I redid the dialogue, just a mouth shape
Wow.
so
Yeah.
that it would work. So I did a first pass at it and then they did it. And it was like, oh, wait, the mouth is way too animated now. It looks like it doesn't work with the rest of the body.
Like a
So they
cartoon,
say,
or
so
is it
you have,
was it
yeah. So they say you have to make it look more like a puppet still, like in between what you did and where it was. So,
Uh-huh.
so it still looks kind of stiff and not that great. So you have to,
Yeah.
because if you make it too articulated, it just doesn't work. with the
The
rest
rest
of
of
the
the
puppet.
it has to be proportional to the rest of the movement.
Yes, exactly. So I
Mm.
had to do a second pass at it and just make the dialogue a little bit less articulated, and then I work. And my work is literally invisible. You would not know.
This is the first time I've heard of this.
Yeah,
Like, I had no
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
and you wouldn't know. I mean, I can't even tell you which scene I did because I've seen the movie and I had no idea which scene it was, but because it all looks kind of stiff when he's talking, but some of it they left the way it was. Some of it I repaired, but I couldn't even tell you which one.
Hmm.
Did you work with the team that made Gore? So we've interviewed Alec Gillis, and he's mentioned that he and his team.
So we were Available Light was almost more of a post-production house
Mhm.
effects. So we did everything after the shoot. So
So
I
no
think
input from them at all, or
I think John Van Vliet, who was the effects supervisor at
Mhm.
Available Light, went to the shoots. And he would kind of like just be there to give as a consultant so that the shots would be set up properly for us.
Mhm.
But we didn't really. I mean that's that's a reason why I went back to animation, because when I was working in effects and live action, I felt so disconnected from the project because
Mhm.
I didn't see the director, I didn't see the art director. We were kind of like in this little post production house doing effects, and I
Yeah.
felt very kind of disconnected from the production. And I was used to work in animation where I would work with the director, the producers, and and it was a very close relationship of everybody, to being almost a separated unit from the main movie. So after doing a few live action movies, I'm like, I started really missing animation and missing that camaraderie I had with the crew.
Yeah.
So that's when I went back to Warner Brothers as a special effects supervisor. At that point, after I finished with Available Light, I went to Warner Brothers and then pursued my career in animation.
So I'm curious, with the procedure that you did for the girl animations, did you basically have a representation of what the mouth movements should look like for each frame as you were animating it?
No, no, it was like that was an impromptu thing because I think it was never intended to be a special effects with us going over the lips and stuff. So that was never an intent. It was more like, oh shit, that doesn't look good.
It came up
We need to do
organically.
something. Right. Yeah, we need to do something. So it was more like, okay, what can we do to fix this? So, hey, Michelle, can we fix this? Can you do this to fix it? It was kind of like that. There was no thought before that Goro would be done that way. It was
Yeah.
more like a Band-Aid. Let's put a Band-Aid on this so it doesn't look too bad, So it was kind of like that. And I did work on another big shot for that movie, but I think it was cut because
Oh,
I actually, like, prior to this interview, I actually went back and looked at the film and I was fast forwarding through it and I'm like, where's that big shot I did? And I was fast forward and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I don't know if I missed it, but there was a big shot with some kind of ghostly creature kind of going like this over, and I can't remember. It was in a big room, and
you know what? At the end of the film, there's a
might
scene, yeah, where Shang Tsung, the main antagonist, summons like all these demons, and there's like a big ghost demon thing
yeah.
that comes
So
out of him.
that might be it. Maybe because I might have lost patience like towards the end, so I gave up. But
Where's my
that might
work?
be it. that might be it. So the way that I did that shot, from what I remember, I drew like 5 or 6 poses,
Uh-huh.
and I used some kind of software to morph between the poses. I can't. It's this a long time ago. I've worked on so many movies with so many effects. To me, it's a bit fuzzy, but
It-
I
it's a
remember
cool
that.
shot.
Yeah, I
It
remember
like,
doing a shot, and I'm not. I can't guarantee that's the shot, but
uh,
it was a shot with like some kind of demon coming out of this room in the room, and so
um,
that's probably it.
I'm,
So
I'm
that was
super curious though, with the Goro technique, how did you determine the way that his mouth should move with the audio to kind of line it up in a way
Well,
that
like as a character animator, when I was at Blues, I mean, that's what we did. We did like lip sync all the
oh
time.
yeah,
So we
yeah,
would be listening and just the intonation and stuff would kind of dictate
wow.
the mouth shape. So I kind of came with that knowledge, having learned these techniques, and I just applied it to Gordon.
So you had those 2 involvements. Were there any others, like even minor, that you had, which you worked on
I
for the film, or no? That you
I
don't
think
remember at
that's
least?
it. I think that's it. I mean, there might have been. I was, like I said, I was doing a little bit of different things. I was working on 3 movies at the same time, so sometimes you're working on a movie and you don't even remember. I mean, I've
Yeah.
done stuff. I've done scenes from films. I don't even remember what film it's from. When I was there at Available Light, I would be getting a shot and I'm like, what was that from anyway? It's like so it's, you're just trying to impress the boss and you're like, and Available Light was like insane deadline. Like, I mean, they needed the scenes like by tomorrow. So it was just, you have no time to think. You're just like, you're thrown into the fire and it's like, it's like, you're just trying to like, I was just trying not to get fired basically at this point. So, so it's, I was super happy for the experience and super thankful. It was great. I mean, and I have super good memories of working at Available Light. Just the whole period was great. So I was in Burbank for, I moved to California in '86, and then I went to Ireland for almost 4 years. And then I came back in 1990 to California, and I was there until 2002. So, and I kind of, by the time I left Hollywood, I was like the head of the special effects department at Warner Brothers Feature Animation. And I basically kind of gave up everything to kind of go pursue an independent career. And now, and I still work for the studios. It's just that I was one of the first guy to work remote. That at the time, now everybody works remote. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm working on this movie right now. Everybody's remote. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I started working remote 20 years ago. And, for me, that's just like reality, but I guess, and the good thing is when I was working remote before that, I couldn't get all my union hours because the union wouldn't accept me because they said, no, you're outside of their jurisdiction
Oh,
of
wow.
Los Angeles. So, but after COVID, they changed all the rules because everybody
Yeah.
started remote.
Yeah.
So now I'm working and I'm actually getting my union hours. So I finally got vested for my 10 years because now I can actually add my hours. So that's awesome. So.
Do the backlogged hours count?
Oh yeah. The backlog hours count. So it all adds
Oh, that's
up. It's
amazing.
Just,
okay.
yeah. So you have to get up to like 10 years to get the minimum, the basic pension. So my wife wants me to shoot for the 15 years because that's a really good deal. But I don't know if I can do like 5 more years, but we'll see.
I mean, throughout your career, you seem to have had a very heavy focus on animation. Like there have
Mhm.
been a few live actions that you've been a part of, but as far as we can tell, your career is mostly focused on animation. Is that a conscious
Yes.
decision?
Oh yeah. It's where I felt it was the most fun, like for me. Like, after like, having experienced both, I mean, doing VFX for live action is essentially animation. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just like an animation crew that's somehow connected to the live action crew. But
Mm.
I mean, if you're a real live action guy, you're on the sets, you're like doing stuff, you're working with the director, that's working in live action. So I feel like I did work in live action, but really still stayed within animation. So I
Yeah.
never felt like I made, and I'm no good with people. I'm a socially kind of awkward person. And I'm like, I don't think I could deal with actors and stuff. I like animation. It's like a troglodyte kind of career, It's like, you're like a hermit. And
So you had mentioned earlier that after Mortal Kombat, you felt so disconnected you wanted to go back to animation.
Mhm.
And on all the various films you've worked on, you basically have these different roles or different credits to you.
Mhm.
And, I noticed when you were working on Disney's Ratatouille, you're credited as the taste visualization designer. Was
Yeah.
that when he was tasting the different foods and they kind of
Yeah,
had that?
yeah. And he sees like, he sees the hallucinations.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that
exactly.
was, well, I worked with Brad on Iron Giant. And
Mhm.
so when Brad left Pixar to do Incredibles, so I was asked to go with him, like to join Pixar. But at this point, I had made my mind that I was moving to Washington States in the middle of the woods, and I was just going to be a remote type artist. And Pixar wasn't really doing remote work at this point. So they brought me in on Incredibles, and I spent 2 weeks there at Pixar. But we decided that, yeah, this just wasn't going to work for me because I really wanted to
Mhm.
move and work remote. But when Brad did his next movie, Ratatouille, so I got a call and say, hey, Brad is on the phone with you. Brad is holding on the line with you. And I said, okay, cool. So I talked to Brad and say, hey, he said, Michel, I've got something on this movie. And that one you're going to be able to do remote because we're just going to give you a blank canvas to do your own thing.
That's
kind
the
of
Oh,
thing.
best.
And
Yeah.
so he said, I had you in mind when I did that sequence. So I said, so I did the sequence and I did the whole thing. That's the first time I actually worked on a CG movie because at that point I had been working on 2D animation
Mhm.
and I never made the bridge to CG. So I was just working on these more traditional feature, but Ratatouille was my first CG. And, but I did I did all my little, it's called synesthesia. It's like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
like, so I did all the synesthesia. I think there's couple minutes worth or something, or a minute and a half worth of it. There's two sequences. There's one where Remy, when he first experienced the food, and there's one where he tried to teach his brother how to visualize food
Hmm.
or whatever. So I did those, and it turned out great, and that was good because then Pixar realized, well, maybe we can do remote. So I did get
Remote work,
some more
yeah.
work after that, like on Brave and stuff. It kind of opened the door. And now I'm working for Brad again and I'm working remote. So it's all good. And this time I'm much more involved on this movie than I was on Ratatouille.
As we said before, you've worked on so many movies which would be considered classics, and just even a short list. I'm looking back at Space Jam, Iron Giant. Aside from Ratatouille, Brave. You've been involved in Star Wars, Powerpuff Girls, but all of these projects that you've been involved in, and all of this discussion that we've had regarding your work, and I still can't figure out if you have a sort of distinctive style that you would specifically associate with yourself, or if your style is as eclectic as the rest of your work is.
When directors or filmmakers bring me in, they always tell me, oh, hey, we want a little bit of that Gagné magic. So they
Okay.
do see me as having a very specific style. And I'm actually producing, directing, and animating an entire feature film by myself right now.
All
So,
right.
and I have already, it's getting really, it's about 75% done. It's insane. It's like the most ambitious thing I've ever done in my life. There's about,
The next goal.
well, there's about 7 years of full-time work that I've put into the film already.
Wow.
That's full-time work where I
Wow.
take a year off completely. I don't do anything else. And I work 50 hours a week
Is
for
that
an
the
entire year.
saga of
It's the
Rex?
saga of Rex, and I have like about 7 years full time put in the film. I need about 2.5 more years to finish it. So it's going to be about 10 years that it will have taken me of full time work to do this film.
Wow.
And that I think will really show the style and the ideas. And this film is me basically. And it has no dialogue. It's all music.
Oh.
So it's a very kind of Fantasia type thing, but very, very sci-fi oriented. It
Mhm.
defies all description because it starts almost like Bambi or something, like a really cute little film, and then suddenly you go, "What the fuck? What?" And you're like,
The
"Holy
best
shit!
kind.
This is like, whoa! This is not where I thought it was gonna go." And so it's, but anyways, that's really like uh, coming from me.
So when can everybody experience this? Like, when do you think you'd
The
be
second,
releasing it?
well, so I'm on Ray Gun right now with Brad Bird.
Mhm.
So I finished the concept phase or development phase on August 9th. And then I'm hoping to join production later on, but that'll be 4 to 6 months. So I'm going to start working on Rex again in August up until I get back to Raygun. And after Raygun, I think I'm going to give the final push and finish it. So I'd say like maybe 3.5 years I'll have the film finished. But you know what? I've been saying that for many years now. So don't take my word. Don't take my word for it.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I
So
think it's going to be good.
you are a multi-award winning animator, visual effects, everything, and I mean, like your works just kind of encompass everything out there. One thing I think we definitely need to mention is that you did visual development for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse,
Yeah.
which on its own won multiple awards. How did you kind of get into that, and what did you bring to that particular
Okay.
movie?
So yeah, so that was weird. I almost didn't do that one because
Oh, really?
I had signed a contract to do another movie. Uh, I was the effects designer, lead animator on My Little Pony. the
Oh,
movie,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which was being done at the same time. And Spider-Man came up, and I'm like, oh shoot, I want to do that. I uh, I want to do
Yeah.
that at least as much as the pony. So so I asked if I contacted the guys with the studio that was doing that pony thing, and I said, could we work a deal where I can work on both movies and we can schedule it so that there's a bit back and forth and we can make it work. And they did. So
Wow.
I was able to work on both film at the same time. And yeah, I was, for Spider-Man, let's see, I think yes, I believe what happened is I got a call and they were having a meeting and somebody said, oh yeah, we need to do effects. And somebody pulled a clip of some effects and it was a clip of my effects. And they said, we need like effects kind of like that and stuff. And then said, yeah, like that's Michel Gagné and stuff. Hey, why don't we give him a call, see if he's available? So I got this call or this email and they said, hey, Michel, could you have a call where like, and it was somebody I had worked with on Powerpuff Girl, the movie, I believe. And I said, sure. So we had a call and Zoom, and I said, yeah, that sounds great. So I was on this for, I think I was 12 weeks on the movie. So it was pretty brief, but it was fun. It was right at the start. So we were kind of developing like the basic visual language for the film and
The
stuff. So.
visual language of that film was spectacular.
Mhm.
I mean, it kind of put Sony
There,
back on the map.
right. I mean, like after I finished, there was because I went back like about a year later, like they called me back a year later and they said, Michelle, there's one more thing that I would like you to tackle. So, and when I came back, the whole crew was different. They had fired the art
Oh,
director. They had fired, so it was like all new people. I'm like, oh wow, that's amazing.
wow.
Like, where
Yeah.
are all these people? And they said, oh, they're all gone. We so
Wow.
so it was a bit tumultuous, I think, the production, but it turned out really good. But I was skeptical of that movie because of that, because I was turned around and it was a little bit of a trying production. I was like, I don't know. I don't think this movie's going to come out so good, but hey, it did. So there you go. So
Even just outside of films and such, obviously you've been involved in you have a book, Search for Meaning, you've been involved in
yeah,
comics,
I have
Batman.
I have
You
16
have yeah,
books.
books exactly. Sorry, I'm just mentioning one. I don't know why,
Right.
but no, you've got multiple books. You've been involved in comics. You even have
Mhm.
worked on a game. Is that because you mentioned earlier? Is that Zico? Is that
Yeah. So
right?
Insane Twisted Shadow Planet, that's the game. So
Mhm.
this happened like the way it worked out is I got contacted by a guy. He was the head of effects at Midway. They
Mhm.
were doing, can't remember what game they were doing, but he said, "Hey, Michelle, we love your work, and would you be available to do some kind of seminar for us on effects?" And I said, "Sure." So we scheduled something. I went to Seattle and just kind of gave, like a 2 or 3 hour lecture on effects, and then I went to lunch with his name is Son. He was the head of effects there. So
Yeah.
me and Joe went to lunch and we started, and then we're kind of like talking about. He said, "Have you ever thought of doing a game and stuff?" And I started like, I said, "I haven't really thought of it, but I said, I don't know, man. I haven't been playing games forever." I said, the only games I played were like side scrollers and stuff, and people probably don't play that shit anymore.
Okay,
And he's like,
we still
"Oh,
got
hey,
them.
yeah." He's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." He said, "No, no, no, man." He said, like, people are still. I said, "So wow." So I could do a side scroller. So by the end of lunch, I'm like, "Okay, let's do the most amazing side scroller ever." And we're like, so I went home. I did some bunch of artwork and concept for the game, and I sent it to Joe. And he's like, and then he did some quick prototyping on it and stuff. So we're kind of going a bit back and forth. And then I'm like, "Okay, I'm sold. Let's do this game." So I told Joe, I said, "Okay, Joe, I want you to go in your boss's office today, and I want you to quit your job, and I want you to call me at 6:30, tell me that you've quit your job, and then we're going in business and doing this game." And he did. I couldn't believe it. He did. He quit his job. He was like head of a department. He quit his job,
Just out of
and we
there.
went from making no money. And we basically did the entire with the game for 4 years on our own dime before we saw anything. So it was like really scary. I mean, I was doing freelance and managing to make a little bit of money so I could keep working on this game. And it was like really hard and really like, is this ever going to get done? I mean, we've invested 4 years of our lives into this and and so after 4 years, we went and pitched it to, and we had been pitching the game, but everybody's like, it's not quite there yet and stuff. So after 4 years, we felt like we had something decent. So we went around and pitched it to Sony and what was that? I can't remember. Tons of all
Nickelodeon?
these. No, not Nickelodeon. The
No?
game companies. All these game companies.
Yeah,
Like,
because they were involved in some games,
oh,
but yeah.
maybe. But anyway,
Yeah.
all these game companies. And then finally, like Sony got interested. What was that other company in San Francisco? There was another company that was interested, and Microsoft was interested. So they was like, whoa, cool, cool. And then eventually we signed a deal, and Microsoft gave us over $1 million. Suddenly it's like, whoa. And, it's me and Joe, and we get handed $1 million. And now we have to basically like get a studio going and hire people and really do the game, because now we have deadlines. So,
Yeah.
and that I can tell you that $1 million went off. I mean, we thought, hey, with $1 million, man, we'll make the most
We
amazing
can do
game.
anything.
It was gone like in no time, because you're hiring programmers and you've got like 13 people on the payroll and something, and it's like, whoa. So, and we did get a bit more money. In the end, I think we got $1.5 million or something, because they give us money for DLC and all that. And the game was pretty successful. I mean, we won.
I mean, I was
we
gonna
won a
say.
BAFTA. We won like the Annie Award for Best Animated Game of the Year. So it did really well with the award circuits, and and it's funny because it got nominated for a BAFTA, which is the highest award for any games. And I was like, oh man, this is my first game. There's no way I'm going to win this. And the BAFTA people like kept emailing me and saying, you should come. You have to come. It's like, this is like, it's a big deal being nominated for a BAFTA. It's like an Oscar. And I'm like, we're not going to win and stuff. So I didn't even go. And my friend Joe didn't go either. We didn't go. And they announced our name. We were the only one at the BAFTA celebration that didn't go to pick up their awards.
Oh my gosh.
On the stage. And they called our names, like directly. They called my name. And I'm like, and I'm watching it live. Like, my wife is watching it upstairs live, and I'm watching it live, and I'm working. I'm so completely sure that I'm not going to win, that I'm working away and it's playing in the background. And then suddenly my category comes up and they announce, and then the actor that was holding the BAFTA said, well, they couldn't make it tonight. So I guess this is the closest I'll ever come to holding one of those. So thanks, guys. And then he left with our BAFTA. So, and that was like, wow, that's insane. I can't believe it. Like I missed out on going and getting a British Academy Award. So that was nuts. But
I'm glad you're so invested in this game to this extent and talking about it to this extent as well, because I really did want to mention it, because this game, I mean, I personally have not played it, but that doesn't mean I don't know about it, because like in the gaming community, a lot of people, especially people who like the side scrollers, consider it one of the best sort of Metroidvanias there is out there. And like an amazing successor in a way, sort of to carry on and such, which came out the previous year. And it's just like this game, if you've not played it, or if you've not even at least seen it, you really need to do yourself a favor. To anybody listening, watching this, go check it out. It is a beautiful game.
Yeah, the visuals are fantastic. I'm looking at it right now. It's just unbelievable.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We worked hard on this, but it was great because I mean, even though the game is Microsoft, it really is an independent game. I can tell you that. It's an independent game. I never dealt with producers, and they're like, Joe would tell me like, oh, the producers, they want to do a minute map. I'm like, no, absolutely. Let's fire the producer. I mean, we're indie guys. And so we really maintained that.
The best kind of company.
And it's funny because when we tried to enter the game as an indie for like the indie awards and stuff, we were rejected because we weren't considered an indie game because we were produced by Microsoft. But it was
technically,
we really had the spirit. I mean, especially having worked on the game for 4 years before getting any money, how much more indie can you get,
Exactly.
But so it's officially not an indie game, but it really is.
We said prior to actually beginning this interview that, your link to Mortal Kombat is in itself minuscule, but at the same time, you also have this sort of tying you to it, considering Midway Games is, where Mortal Kombat really began.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting sort of thing to look back on.
Yep. It's all full circle. It's the circle of life, man.
Exactly.
It really it's crazy how Mortal Kombat kind of ties everybody together in these obscure ways.
Well, I found out more, I mean, I really, when I got into Mortal Kombat, like when I did the feature, I had zero knowledge of this property whatsoever. So this was my first introduction. It was like, Mortal Kombat, oh, what is this? It was kind of like that. It was like, I didn't know anything about it. So it was, it was early. I mean, it was
Mhm,
like
yeah.
in 1995. Okay,
95,
95.
yeah.
Right, 95. So I don't know if the franchise wasn't properly as big as it is now, but well, I guess in 95 was still pretty big, I guess.
Yeah, I think at
I
that
mean,
point
everybody, because I mean, I would mention that I'm working on Mortal Kombat to people and they'd go, what? You're working on Mortal Kombat? And they were like going insane. They're like, man, you should be like, you must be so happy. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm happy I have a job. I mean, I guess I didn't fully appreciate it, I guess.
Did
But I
it
mean, I
affect your
was,
career at all? With people knowing that you had this attachment to it? Or not so much?
it's like my career is like, it's not really. I mean, it's just like I've been just kind of bouncing from one thing to the other. And it's all kind of, I mean, once I got into blues, I have never applied for a job after that. I've never
Wow.
sent a resume. It's always been word of mouth. It's always been
Yeah.
like somebody's there, they call me up, hey, Michelle. And it's like the best you do your work, the more you get that,
Mhm.
people will call you back. So and frankly, like I've reviewed portfolios for studios. For 6 years, I reviewed applicants for Warner Brothers. I can tell you something. If you go through the regular channels, like applying for a job the way regular people do,
Mhm.
it's really hard.
Yeah.
99% you're going to get rejected. The way to get in at Disney, Pixar, Warner Brothers, any of these places is knowing somebody who brings you in. And
Yeah.
that's really the key, because it's like, I mean, I've had job offers for Disney, but I guarantee you that if I would have applied, I would have been rejected. Yet they've
Mm,
given me offer because it came from people that were there that wanted to bring me on. So it's, it's good to be able to go in through the back door rather than the front door, because the front door
yeah.
is really hard to get through.
Would you have any other advice for aspiring animators who are hoping to break out into the industry?
I don't know. Is there going to be an industry now with AI? I mean, it's like,
That's
It's
actually something
funny.
we wanted to ask you.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, I mean, I read all these things like these people like quitting visual effects because they like, they work 6 months on a shot and then somebody does a prompt and redo the whole shot in 15 minutes. It's like,
Gosh.
and people want to kill themselves. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really played with AI, so I don't really know. But like, I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's, even my union had an emergency meeting about it, how it's
Yeah.
affecting everybody. And it's like, and, Katzenberg said he's going to lay off like 90% of the workforce and
Yeah.
replace with AI. I mean, it's so I mean, seriously, like AI is a bit of a threat. It's a reality. It's like, you can't avoid it. And it's like people try to stop it. You won't be able to stop it. It's like, because the thing is that you have all these kids now that won't have any problems using AI because they grew up with it and
Mm,
they have no problems with it. So the old guys that just say like, oh, AI, it's not real, it's not art and stuff. It's, if we don't, I mean, in my mind, us as artists, we need to be the one harnessing AI because the hacks are going to have no problems using AI.
mhm.
So, and so the way that I see AI for me, I would look at AI more as a super assistant
Yeah, like a
for
tool.
myself rather
Yeah.
than creative generator. So
Right.
I would be the one creating the art, the the concepts, the style, and the AI would be my ultimate assistant. But I would try
Mm.
to teach AI on my own language, on my own visuals, so that
Yeah.
it understands my visual linguistic and
Mhm.
does not borrow from other people that are completely unrelated to my art. I mean, I don't want to create a art with other people's art that doesn't even look like anything I would do. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
if I use AI, I want people to look at it and say, oh, that's a Michel piece.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
You train
and,
it
and
with
if,
your own work itself.
right. Or something that I molded so that is truly reflective of my vision.
Mhm.
And because, a lot of these AI pieces that I look, they're so anonymous. I mean, I can't even tell. I mean, a lot of them are beautiful. They're gorgeous pieces. They're anonymous. You can't
Mhm.
tell, But I mean, I've
That's
seen
so
really
generic.
interesting things on it. Like they asked like 10, they showed like this painting to 10 people and they told them it was created by an artist. And the comments were like, wow, that's a masterpiece. That's masterwork. So, wow, so cool, beautiful and stuff. And then they took that exact same painting and they said, this was created by AI. The comments so generic. Oh, has no style. It's just so derivative. It's like,
Yeah.
and just by putting the label, it completely changed the perception. So,
Wow.
so I mean, but so that means that we have a bias. So we're not really objectively criticizing AI because we almost have a hatred for it as
Yeah.
artists, you know? So I think we need to put that aside and see how we can make it work for us because it's not going away. It's not going away, I'm afraid. And I kind of hate it, but I'm like, okay, I'm willing to open up and use it, you know, and see where I can go with it because it's not going to go away. It's in Photoshop now. I mean,
Yeah.
God's sake,
Yeah.
Mm.
you draw a
Yeah.
background, you want to extend it, and the AI will do it for you.
So I'm curious, young artists, are facing this challenge with AI at the moment and how to either incorporate it or to move around it. What were some of the challenges that you faced early on in your career and how did you yourself overcome those?
Right. Well, I mean, what's happening with AI has
Mhm.
been happening uh, throughout my career with different things. Like I remember when it was first announced that ink and paint was going to be done by a computer.
Oh,
Mm.
People
yeah.
were up in arms with it. It was like, oh, that's insane. I can't believe it. Ink and paint, that's like an art form and stuff. That was all gone.
Yeah.
And then you had people painting on the computer. And then automatic in betweening, came or drawing with a Cintiq and
Yeah.
ditching the paper altogether. A lot of people didn't make that transition. They wouldn't make it. They couldn't deal with it. And you have to adapt. And that's what I've been trying to do throughout my whole career is always adapt and look at the new technology but always try to keep my voice as an artist. So never let the technology overwhelm my style, overwhelm my ideas, but just use them to push them.
Mhm.
So, and I mean, if you reject, it's suicide as an artist to reject technology. So I'm thinking that it's probably basically suicide right now to reject AI, even though that's the first temptation. And that's kind of like, I mean, I'm finishing my film. I'm not going to use AI on Saga Rex. That's for sure. I want to make that one completely old school, but I'm not going to spend another 10 years making a feature film. So if I can use AI so I can make a feature film in 2 to 3 years instead of 10 years, yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm totally open to it for sure. I'm
Mhm.
only have a limited amount of years on this planet, so I want to make the most out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like finding the best way to use that new tool in such a way where I suppose it feels morally correct to do so, but also, you with your own style, as we said, using your
Right.
own works and such to actually
Yes.
make it
Yeah.
your
You
own.
want you want AI to be an extension of you. You don't want to
Hmm.
be an extension of AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what I'm seeing a lot of these young kids now, they're basically a mouthpiece for AI. They're just creating this thing, but there's nothing that can differentiate their work from one AI artist to another. It all looks the same. It all has that same feel. And I think the next step will be to see what real artists can do with AI and if we can harness it to make it do what we want to do and not, we can live in fear, but it's going to come.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so it's like you can live in fear and be exterminated, or you can, you
Adapt.
know, or you can adapt. It's like the
Yeah.
Borg. Resistance is futile.
So, what sort of legacy or impact do you personally hope to leave through your various works on the world?
Well, that be for the world to decide. I mean, you know what? It's like legacy and all that. It's all a fantasy because eventually the sun is going to go become a red giant and it's going to absorb the earth and everything is going to be wiped out anyway. So the goal in life is to be happy, to create things that make you happy and make the people around you happy. And it's like, and whatever humanity will decide what it wants to remain. And eventually humanity will disappear. So it's like, we're all a blip. So make it work, make it count when you're here and do the best you can and do things that make you vibe.
Michelle, before we let you go, where can our listeners find you?
They can find me, they can Google me. Just
Yeah.
Google my name. Google my name and it's like
It's everywhere.
it will be my website will come up probably like at the top. I have a YouTube channel where I put lots of stuff. I have probably 60, 70 videos on there. Um, all snippets of movies I've worked on. There's trailers for the game, all kinds of stuff, and a bunch of snippets from Saga Rex. I'm going to put some new stuff. It's always a bit of it's a bit tricky to put stuff from movies because, when you start working on a movie, you sign a disclosure that you'll never showcase anything that you've done on the film,
Yeah.
like publicly. So I always take a little bit of a risk and put some tests and stuff. Like, sometimes I get like a strike and stuff, but I try to put interesting stuff like on YouTube, and then I have a movie I worked on that's coming out in October, called Piece by Piece. It's a biopic on Pharrell Williams.
Oh, okay.
All
And
right.
so I got contacted for that movie because I did in Ratatouille, I did like the synesthesia sequence.
Yeah.
And Pharrell has that same condition where when he listens to music, he he has synesthesia. So
Oh.
they
Huh.
contacted me and they say, "Hey, we'd like you to do some synesthesia for Pharrell Williams." Like so it's in the movie. But the tricky thing is that this movie is entirely made out of Lego
Huh.
because Pharrell Williams said he would do a biopic, but he said he wanted it to be completely made out of Lego.
Oh,
And so it's a
interesting.
documentary. It's not a movie for kids.
Uh-huh.
It's like a real documentary. It's made by Melville, the famous documentary. And but and when I saw the movie, a lot of the time you saw live action photos or people sitting on a chair in live action and stuff, and they were talking. But now I've seen the trailer and they've redone everything in Lego, which is interesting. Which is
That's really
interesting.
cool.
And it's a really good movie. It's actually like the last version I saw, I was amazed. I was like, wow, is a really cool movie. And I'm not really a big Lego movie fan. And
Uh-huh.
this is really not a Lego movie. It's more of a documentary on somebody's life, and it just happens to be made out of Lego. But the challenge was for me to do synesthesia, and they wanted me to make the synesthesia Lego legal, which means that every frame
Uh,
has to be an existing piece of Lego, and I could never go out of what
Mm.
existed in Lego. So it was a real challenge, like trying to do
Full
some
on research on the different parts.
yeah.
hallucinations and stuff. But like and if I sometimes, at first I was stretching and squashing the shape too much. It doesn't look like Lego anymore. It
Too
has
much.
every frame has to look like a Lego. So but it turned out pretty darn good. I was like, wow, that's that. Anyway, you can see the trailer.
That's
It's called
such an interesting concept.
yeah, it's called Piece by Piece. And the funny thing is when the first interview, when they start talking, you hear Will Ferm saying, "Hey, why don't we make this movie out of Lego? Like the whole movie out of Lego?" And the guy's like, "Are you serious?" And so that was actually like the first interview, but that wasn't, they kept it in the movie. And it's made out of Lego. When they're talking and they're having this conversation, they're both like made out of Lego. And that's how kind of like the film starts. But it's very interesting that they just, I guess he didn't want his face or everybody's face for real. He just wanted to have this kind of, it's a bit of a metaphor. And in his mind, he said it was a metaphor that he built his whole career and piece by piece.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it's Lego is piece by piece. So you kind of saw like a metaphor for that.
That's really creative.
Yeah. So anyway, you
What?
can check the trends piece by piece. It's coming out in October. That's the last movie I worked on, besides Raygun and Sega Rex, which will be
Which
a little bit
will be
down the
coming out
line.
soon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our listeners for stopping by the
All right.
Realmcast. And thank you very much, Michel, for joining
Well,
us on this episode.
yeah.
Seriously, such a
Sorry,
pleasure.
sorry, I didn't have much more story about the Mortal Kombat. I wish I
Oh,
would have had more to
I
give
love
you.
it.
Oh
But
no,
It's so
trust
fascinating.
me, you
Yeah.
actually had so much interesting information on scenes that, at this point, Mortal Kombat fans think, we have all the information that could be out there, but then you just come in and you're like, oh, I don't have much, and then proceed to shed completely new information on the
I
movie.
can
So thank
quote
you.
the entire movie, and I had no idea of the stuff that you just told us. So
yeah. Oh well, I
like,
mean that's it. Sometimes they say like the best effects is in effects you don't see.
yeah,
So,
yep,
and I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little embarrassed by the lip sync, frankly, because I had to make it really stiff so it looked like the puppet. So it almost looks like I downgraded my animation to make it work. But anyway, it's all good. It's all good.
I love
was,
it. Michel, thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure talking
Thank
to you
you.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our listeners for stopping by the Realmcast and joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to further support the show, then consider buying us a coffee, which you can do through the link in the description.
You can find Yanni and myself, Phantom, on all our social media pages at Realmcast.
Join our official Discord channel hosted on Mortal Kombat Online server, also through the link in the description, where we discuss Mortal Kombat along with our listeners.
Special thanks to Uppercut Editions and Collector's Maze for their continued support. The Realmcast is the official podcast of Mortal Kombat Online.
Catch up on all episodes of the Realmcast or join us on our live show, The Soul Stream, on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Spotify, mortalkombatonline.com, or realmcast.com.